Welcome to Connect, Curate, Create, where we're on a journey through the arts and creative industries. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Butcher. If you're anything like me, you love learning about art and creativity. In each episode, I ask artists and creatives how they navigate life, work, and more besides. They generously share their stories and offer invaluable insights that you and I can put into action. As the author of Creative Work Beyond Precarity, I blend my mission to give artists a fair go with my academic smarts, to ask the questions that draw out lessons we can all learn from.
Every time I have basically let go of all of that past dialogue and let go of my critics and let go of all of that stuff and then just done something different and something that just is just as a result of boredom and flow, that's often when the good things really start to happen, and that's often what then gets picked up. It's like the moment I took my horse out of the race, you know, with uni and with my other work. It was back to the business of just living and then realising that there's this whole understory of life that's doing the same. And because of that, I'm mad about metaphors, and it's really powerful. I'm just observing the things and then finding the metaphor at the moment. And it's amazing because I feel like I'm learning a lot. Actually sitting down and demanding to understand a reading forces you to read 9 others and to lie on your back and think about things for a while and to try and form a theory out of that and see whether or not it works. And I would never want to give that back because I don't think I ever would have realised. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, I think. I thought that I was doing the thing, but the PhD really forced me to interrogate that.
In this episode, I talk with Anna VanStralen, an artist based in Launceston, Tasmania. Anna shares a journey from creating miniature worlds as a child to understanding her art through the lens of transcendentalism. She offers meaningful insights into how noticing informs her art, the value of understanding her work conceptually, and this was a delightful surprise. Anna also offers us a reading. Be sure to check out the show notes for highlights and links that you can use to shape your own journey. And if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about Connect, Curate, Create. Today, I am in Trevelyan in Launceston, Tasmania, with artist Anna VanStralen. And we've had an interesting morning. The original aim was to meet at Enterprise Tasmania and have a chat there. And Anna, we're now in your home, and what a beautiful home filled with art. So I think this is much more fitting, much more appropriate about what we're going to talk about, and I can't wait to hear what you've got to say. So thank you for inviting me over.
It's lovely to have you here, and I really thank you for being able to bring all your many things over here and be flexible. But yes, so when you've got a child who's got their 1-year-old molars coming through, sometimes things have to change, and yeah, it's actually very interesting learning to be flexible and learning to think, well, what can I do? And that's been a very interesting. Actually, that's probably if this was to have a title, I suspect it would be something like "What Can I Do?"
Thank you.
That's a picture of my life.
You just saved me about 5 minutes work there. Great. I will definitely use that if I may.
No, that's fine.
Cool. Yeah. So Iona's teething, and last time we met, you and Iona came along. We had a coffee and we were talking about Connect, Curate, Create and the possibilities and so on. But today I'd really love to talk to you about your practice. And yeah, so something that strikes me is, I have one of your paintings on my wall, and we'll probably come back to that. But I noticed your most recent Instagram post is of a sculpture. Would I be right in saying it's a sculpture?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and so how fluid is your practice? What is your practice, I guess, would be the best question to start with.
I'd say that its core is painting. And in some senses, being left at home alone too long, probably, I've been sitting and thinking and making comparisons, and the biblical model of of Paul in Acts and all the letters is that he goes out and tells people about his passion and what he's enthusiastic about and what matters to him. But he also is a tent builder, and that is something that it comes out in the text that it's important to him that he can pay his own way and he can look after himself, and he has some kind of skill to offer that he can always fall back on. And so the comparison for me is that my tent making business is my painting. It's something that I can continue to improve. It's always something that I have to offer. And although that's not very romantic, I like this idea that, well, I can always make tents and people will always like and engage with and see something and be able to inhabit my tents. But being, again, at home a lot at the moment with, lots of responsibilities, and I'm juggling a lot of things. Everything bleeds into everything else. And so I started making sculptures out of the chaos, mainly just for a bit of a palate cleanser. After a project, I like to do something that's just for me. And then pesky people kept responding to them and finding them interesting and wanting to talk about them. And then I accidentally had things to say about them and had feelings about them. And they became, this point of expression that I never really intended, but I'm just leaning into it right now because it feels right.
Fabulous. And so that most recent sculpture I know is a cormorant. Would I be right?
Yeah. It's missing its siblings at the moment. The idea is one of those kitsch ceramic duck trios flying up the wall, and I thought it would be kind of fun to turn it on its head and make a trio of cormorants that starts with the smallest and then the medium size and then the largest, and have it diving.
Beautiful.
And I'm having great fun with it. It's funny, people are responding to it really interestingly, that it's made out of old chunks of tyre. And people either love it or hate it. It's like, oh, you've got tyres, chunks of disgusting old tyre on your wall, and it's a cormorant, which I don't like. It's some people are finding them really anti-aesthetic, some of them, which I think is interesting because it's still garnering this really strong reaction that they've got this response to the materiality that I didn't expect. And then there are other people that are just frothing over it, not to boast, but like I think it's just the tactile, being able to take most of them are busted out tyres that I found. Most of the material I've used for these ones, sorry. To clarify, busted out tyres that I found at the Longford Mill Dam. And, I don't know what they did, but they blew their tyres to absolute smithereens. And so these fragments of either this catastrophic incident or people being insanely reckless, they just become these really interesting story little pieces to reassemble into. And at the moment, we're having a terrible trouble with cormorants in Tasmania. Black cormorants are getting in all the nets, and they're too clever, and they're snagging everyone's catches, and they're causing havoc with some of the industries. And people are talking about, shall we cull them? And my thoughts are, well, I think this has probably happened before. And when you get population expansion, you get population collapse eventually. And I think that it's just like, well, we have to occupy the same space, and they're better fishermen than us. And I think sometimes we just got to lump it. That's my feelings. And I think that there's this interesting little factoid about them where their feathers, they're not waterproof. And it turns out that being waterproof is not really great for fishing, that it's really great for staying warm. So you look at platypus and they bob around on the top like a cork, and you kind of go like, how do you live like that? And then you've got cormorants who, they sacrifice their comfort, and they live on a knife's edge as far as being cold or when they're wet and they need to dry out. They put out their wings like sails whenever there's sun, because they are able to dive faster and better because they allow themselves to get right to the edge of existence, really. And I think that's like, well, I respect that.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. No, Bjarne loves them because he sees them at a distance and they're there drying out. And I know, as a fisherman myself, why they're drying out. And he just sees them as sitting ducks. So back to the 3 ducks on the wall, I guess.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I can understand what you're saying in some regards. Where I live in Mole Creek, we're overrun with rabbits. And just yesterday morning, we were out on a morning walk, and Bjarne loves spotting them and flushing them out and all the rest of it. He's on the lead, so he knows he can't get them. But there was one yesterday, and it just looked like the jelly mold that my mum had when I was a kid.
I love the jelly mold.
Yeah,
I had the jelly mold,
and I could suddenly taste strawberry jelly. So that there's this sort of incredible, so your understanding of the cormorant, your relationship with the materialities, and then how that's resonating for people. That's how does an artist engage people on a level that's of meaning beyond just, oh, that looks nice, I'll buy it. It's more, oh, wow, there's something quite deep here and I don't quite understand it.
And that's what I think it happened by accident in the beginning because I find that I believe this is true. Sometimes you go to say things and think, am I romanticizing things? But no, I think it really is true that I really like to strive for a project and to push myself and to take feedback. I pride myself on being able to take tough criticism and really think to myself, is this true? Because if it's true, I should respond. It's, the biggest lost opportunity if somebody gives you a piece of painful, honest feedback about your work. And if that could be used to make it better, then, I want to use that. But, sometimes people just say things and so being able to sort them out. But sorry, where was I going with that? Yes, that's right. But I feel like every time a project finishes and I've really pushed and squeezed every drop out of it that I can, and then you need that rest time, and then when I come back into it, it's generally with a fair bit of sorrow for the last project and for the last era, and realizing that there's that aspect of letting it go. I don't understand people that can make the same artworks over and over and over and over again forever. Like, good on them. If they're feeling plugged into that, then that's fine. That's just not me. I need to have some kind of change, some kind of slight push on the steering wheel. And every time I have basically let go of all of that past dialogue and let go of my critics and let go of all of that stuff, and then just done something different and something that just is just as a result of boredom and flow, that's often when the good things really start to happen. And that's often what then gets picked up, hopefully, by, helpful critics. And then it becomes the next iteration. And that's,
So do you feel this is the next project that's emerging?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'm not isolating it into just sculpture or just painting or anything. I'm just going to do what's appropriate at the time. And at the moment, paintings and sculptures are sitting quite nicely together because I think of what I'm doing. And I think because what I'm doing is honest, it's working. Because basically I'm going for lots of walks with the kids. And I had this experience of going. Tamar Island is one of my favourite places in Launceston because it just feels poetic, and it's funny that it's not really a poetic place. It's just a lump of mud that they just kept building up, and yet it's so beautiful and it's so alive. And when you're walking out there, it's kind of like you can see the whole of Launceston stretched down in front of you, and you're not far away from it at all. And you can hear everything that's going on, and you can see these cranes that are busy manoeuvring things around. And I had this sort of noticing that that's how I feel at the moment, is that I have this whole world that I've usually engaged with much more deeply, but I feel stepped back and away from it. And you'd think that would be a sort of a lonely or a difficult place to be. But I found that it's left me a lot of time for noticing. And so this sort of bird thing kind of came out of going, well, what's around me? And like, who's here and what are they doing? And suddenly all of this stuff came into focus. Like I started noticing the fantail in my garden and its weird behavior, and I still don't know what it was doing, but there were two fantails that were acting together, and I think that they were responding to some kind of threat. And it's like these little mini dramas are playing out all over the place. And what really struck me was how in sync my life was with theirs, far more. You know, it's like the moment I took my horse out of the race, you know, with uni and with my other work, it was back to the business of just living, and then realizing that there's this whole understory of life that's doing the same. And because of that, I'm mad about metaphors, and it's really powerful. I'm just observing the things and then finding the metaphor at the moment, and it's amazing because I feel like I'm learning a lot.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful! Yeah, I can. That really resonates with me. I guess a part of my photographic practice is about trying to familiarize myself, understand a place by that deep noticing. You know, sort of following the same paths over and over again. But you mentioned their uni. So perhaps let's get into the backstory of you know. So your interest in metaphor, this sort of more conceptual work that you do, does that stem from your time at uni, and what did that involve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my sort of uni adventure started off in the School of Architecture, and I'm really glad that it did. I think because I was able to notice a lot about what it is that I like to do without the pressure of feeling like I have to be an artist. Like I feel like architecture and design and art all have so much to do with one another, and yet they speak in a completely different language. And I felt like in the School of Architecture, I felt under a lot less pressure to perform or to be like others. It was just we were given our technical work to do, and I found that in some ways I was responding in this certain way, and I was being encouraged, you know, maybe you should go to the art school. And I was like, I am not a failure. Don't say that. And it's not that I thought that artists were failures, but I just had that internalized art misogyny. I don't know what to call it. It was like my family was like, no, you can't do that because you can't live like that. And so I felt really frightened of you know, going into a place that you can't live like. But in the end, had this, you know, great experience of realizing that was something that, you know, it was all of the art aspects of architecture that I was loving to engage with, and I really didn't care if buildings happened or not. Although I like being in other people's lovely buildings.
Well, yeah. Temple Grandin talks about how there are two types of visual learners. And so I don't know if you've read that book, Visual Thinking, but no. Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess it's a way into to really acknowledge neurodiversity, and particularly forms of visual thinking. So very often I'll say I'm visual, but for me, what I do is I create worlds in my head. And what Temple Grandin talks about is that's generally one type, but then architects and engineers and people like that, they love mapping things. And so my world isn't a map. My world is and it's not all unicorns and castles, but it's like, you know, as a kid I played with Lego. So yeah, so as a kid, what did you play with?
Well, it's funny because I haven't really made this comparison recently, but I think about it, I'm like, that makes sense. I used to love drawing little things and then cutting them out and then putting them into other things. I loved the idea of encapsulating things or making dioramas, and, you know, whether that was little houses or I'd go outside and find all of the potential fairy garden building materials and I'd make little structures and everything. But it was all about like that kind of dollhouse idea of being able to look down on a tiny version of the world. So if you're talking about mapping and everything, I'm like, yeah, actually that really checks out.
Yeah.
And I remember very vividly, I was meant to be tidying my room one day, and instead I was making a I was trying to make an absolute scale model of a tree and have it in a block of wood so that I could have the whole understory of the ground, and I was painting the roots onto it. And I remember just being like, I just wish I could use a drill. And I would have been about maybe 9. And like power tools were life-changing for me, like realizing that, wow, sticky tape and glue, old news.
Under supervision?
No.
Fantastic.
I got post-supervision, which was basically tie your hair back or it'll rip your scalp off. My dad was very much like the and you will die. Like, that's how I was taught things, da-da-da-da-da, do this or you will die.
Yeah.
And it was very effective.
Oh, but yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. So from dioramas and power tools to uni, I mean, how did you get from there to there?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I always drew. I always did creative things. People used to always be like, oh, what's she going to do with her life? She's so creative and everything. But, talking, you brought up neurodivergence before, and I think I have a superpower / super weakness of hyperfocus. And I think if I'm interested in something, then it grabs me by the throat and won't let me go until I'm done with it. And I'm learning to manage that now, because sometimes that can be a real problem, because I've learned the saying, don't make something that you have to do compete with something that you want to do. So I tried to do nursing, and I lasted a month, and that month was really interesting, like stimulating and everything. And then after that month, I started to get bored, and also the cadavers grossed me out. But mostly it was just the assignments were non-stimulating and they weren't exciting and they weren't what I expected. And I'm also really glad that I'm not a nurse, because I don't think that I have that methodical nature that would enjoy that. So I think that was just my brain tapping me on the shoulder and saying, nah, you don't want to be here. And then after that, it was just that continual battle with finding something that was able to hold my attention for a long period of time enough to work for it. And architecture was that in the first place. But I couldn't help noticing that the way the wind was blowing when it came to, the use of technology, I found more boring. And so I just knew that that was going to be a problem for me. And so I just started to follow my nose about, well, what is it that I like to do? And then art school became, it became obvious to me after a while that it had the diversity of practice that I needed. And so I really just did it for human benefit, because I was working at a shoe store and just kind of discovering who I was and what I wanted. And so it was a way of slowing my life down while I figured out who I was. And then that, I encountered that during art school and realised that I had been misinformed about its, potential to be the bones of a life. And I've never looked back.
Wow. I mean, that's so insightful for me, particularly. It's sort of for you to be so self-reflective and pragmatic, to talk about, to think, okay, I'm going to take this on because it engages me. It's something I want to do, and it's going to slow me down so I can actually have time to consider the rest of my life. I mean, I've never done that myself, so that's revelatory to me. But
that's post dissection of what I think I was doing, though. Like, I think I just thought, you have to do something, don't you? Like, I was aware that I didn't know myself very well, and everyone's like, I was 22 at that point, and I'd worked a couple of jobs and everything, and it was basically like, when are you going to do something that you meant, the regular things, when you're going to be normal? And it was my concession to being normal. But I think looking back, it was, in some ways, it was an excuse.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, I suppose architecture would be deemed normal.
Yeah.
Not to say the arts is not normal, but it's not, if you wanted to make a lot of money and or have the chance to make a lot of money and have a steady career, architecture would have been a great path to follow, perhaps.
Yeah.
but not art. So I guess you're driven by something much deeper.
I don't really mind very much about money. I like having food to eat and fun things to do, but it's never been a huge driver to my life. And it's funny because I've got a friend who's like, that's her everything, like, and not in a bad way. It's not a criticism, but it's just like she has the capacity to make lots of money and she is doing it really well. And it means that she's like living this high stress, highs and lows kind of life. And I love spending time with her and I love seeing what makes her tick and everything. And it's just funny that we have so much in common as friends, but it's just like I've looked at what she does and going like, she's, you know, and the things that we have are so different, but it's just like, I don't want those things enough to do what you do.
No.
Like, so I'm leaving that to you and good on you. But realizing that, you know, there's different ways to live and you don't need to justify yourself and that good people find other good people and doesn't matter that much.
No. And I guess this is something I've sort of latterly discovered is just that, having had a salary all my life, had a very, you know, changing careers from engineering to academia, but always, having that security and stability that my father wanted for me when he said to me, Tim, you're not going to art school. So that's why I do this podcast, and that's why I'm interested in you and your work, Anna. And so I suppose we're sort of back almost to the current day, but I think there's one piece missing here, which is, so you're in uni. So you got your PhD. Mm-hmm. Did you work right through from undergraduate to PhD? How did it work?
No, I didn't. So I spent most of my undergrad like finding myself, and I nearly didn't. Like it was sort of like the last elective of the last year that I suddenly found some kind of voice. And I think it's just a maturing process. There was a part of my brain that hadn't clicked into gear. And so I just didn't see everything in sharp focus until that last part. And so then I went straight into honours with that, you know, new revelation of, because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. Again, it was like that next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And I had trouble with imitation. You know, I not imitating other people's work, but imitating their thinking. I didn't know how to explain or even how to show up for my ideas and build them into something. I just would respond. And it was like, I don't know, this sounds a bit dramatic, but it was almost like animalistic. I'd just do something and they'd just be like, this is the outcome. And then when I came to explain the why, I'd try and make something up, you know. And so turning that into, how do I start with what really matters to me and what I'm really interested in, and then how do I take that idea and then use that to make art? It was like I didn't know how to control that. It was like my ideas were just this horse that was just galloping around a paddock. Yep. And I didn't know how to make it do anything useful. That last part of that semester, I figured out how to jump on its back, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. And I think that was probably just a lack of faith in myself. I think I was a bit concerned that if I told myself to do something and then tried to do it, maybe it wouldn't be good. I went into honours and you know, rode that horse and had a wonderful time. And then I was really fortunate to get the opportunity to do some teaching. And then that was brilliant because teaching forces me to continue learning. And in some ways I learned better than I ever had before, because you really have to know what you're talking about when you're presenting it to other people. You have to know all the gaps. And so it really made me lean into, the theoretical side of things even more. And I just, was really loving it. And then I had a baby, and then I thought, I'm done for a bit. And then all of a sudden the opportunity for a PhD came and the idea came, and people kept saying, why do you want to do a PhD? Like, you know, do you want to be an academic? And I was like, well, I'm open to the idea, but no, that's not really why I want to do it. I just want to do it because I want to see if I can. And so I did. And it was the best experience of my life. I keep telling people when they ask me, you know, what did it do for you? I just sort of said, well, I have to say that it just does what it says on the tin, really. And that's just, it forces you to show up for the thinking, and to really be able to stand by your work and say that, this is how it engages with the world. And it gave me the language to do that. And I think something else that I kind of learned out of it too was that I was reading all of these journal articles and everything. And, I've been reading journal articles for like 7 or 8 years at that point. And it was like it's maybe 1.5 to 2 years in, it was like a magic eye. Suddenly things just sort of slotted in together. And I went, I haven't understood any of this. And I did, but it was like in such a perfunctory way. And then actually sitting down and demanding to understand a reading forces you to read 9 others and to lie on your back and think about things for a while and to try and form a theory out of that and see whether or not it works. And I would never want to give that back, because I don't think I ever would have realized. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, I think. I thought that I was doing the thing, but the PhD really forced me to interrogate that. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And so hence with the work you're doing right now, it's having, you're in an embodied way, feeling your way through the materialities, you're noticing things, but you have that conceptual lens, you have that theoretical grounding now to be able to understand what you're doing in that process.
Well, that's it. And I think, talking about not understanding, I think that I thought that I was, everyone around me was talking about Barbara Bolt and I'm just trying to think of who else. Even Bachelard and phenomenology, I can never say that word. And I felt like I needed to plug into that world because that felt like everything, that was what was going on. But I kept coming back to the fact that it was like, I work with materials, but this isn't about materiality. And I didn't have the words to kind of figure out what it was that wasn't working for me. But I'm like, no, this is not it. Yeah. And I think I easily, in undergrad, I probably just would have gone, okay, you tell me what it is. And I'll tell you what it is after that. And during the PhD, I was able to sort of say, what am I really trying to do here? And it's like, I'm trying to make a tool to communicate with other people and reach into their lives. And I also want them to reach back into me. And the word I found for it was the transcendentalism, which, is something that basically got left and dropped pre-modernism, except it sort of popped its head up again recently because this idea that you either believe that everything is material and it's all about physical experience, or you believe that your work can do something more. And whether or not you believe in in any kind of theism or not, if you believe, I think that art is useful and can be a tool which is moral and ethical and transformative. I think that transcendentalism is actually a really good fit. And post-war, there were a few Jewish transcendentalists that I kind of caught hold of who were talking about how to rebuild the world, people need to understand one another and come from completely different places, and we need to be able to basically regard one another and find some kind of understanding. And that's how I started building my art practice, is this idea of my outward face that is looking to come into contact with the face of the other. And that's the kind of Judith Butler way of talking. But and then to say that, at that edge space, there's friction and there can be sparks and something can happen from that. And materiality wasn't enough to kind of, it wasn't the way that I felt that I wanted to describe what I was doing.
No, of course not. No. Wow. Yeah. Look, so many questions, but I'll only ask the one now. So I suppose if I were to sort of feed back to you what I've just heard is in in the age we live in now, where truth is constantly questioned, where metaphor is misused, misappropriated for political gain and power, and the existential threats that we face from those in power, and how that affects our daily lives. We need, art is able for art to be able to transport us to another space, another realm, perhaps, where we can start to rethink and question. So sort of go away to come back and say, hey, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel right.
That's it. Yeah.
I sent you on to read something. You've got some papers in front of you.
I do.
Yeah, please please share.
I'm going to take a short break to get my child.
Yes, I heard. Yeah, yeah. That's okay. No worries. We're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute.
Okay. So there's this short story called Birdhouse by a Sydney writer called Annie Zhang. And it's a piece of fey writing, which is my favourite kind. And I just want to share it because, again, it speaks to something that I'm trying to encounter, and she's really nested this really interesting feeling. So I'll just read until I feel like it's time to stop. But I may read the whole thing.
Thank you.
What are you remembering? How you trembled in the cup of my palm. I had given birth to a songbird, a bloody swell of down, delicate as a shell. Your red eyes resembled wounds and your wings were wet with gore. The midwife cried out when she saw you and the nurses shrank away, but I stroked your little head with my finger, and you opened your beak and made your first gurgling sound. Love quivered through me. It was a fearsome feeling. And then, and then, and then... I did not understand your appetite then, but I hunted for you. I squeezed mouse blood into a cup and fed it to you like milk. I collected beetles and caught you worms. During your first week in the world, the sky sent a magpie to the window of your room. It smashed the glass and flew over your cradle, stretching the rippling dark river of its neck to look at you with pebble-black eyes. Shattered from slumber, you screamed and cried. The magpie seized you in its beak and extended its wings to fly. I snatched the creature in my hands and wrung its neck. That night I bent over my sewing machine and made heavy damask curtains. I hung them over your broken window and drew them tight. But the sky rattled my house with its fists and the curtains gusted open. Magpies arrowed into your room, 4 of them at once. They pecked and shrieked and swooped at me, and I battered at them over and over again with a broomstick. I struck one on the wing and felt its bones break. It screamed and all the birds flew as suddenly as they had come. I watched the injured one sink into the lighted distance. You would live without a window, I decided. I could not let the sky or its songbirds see you. I assembled a pane with plywood, tape, screws, and an old drill, and as I worked, the sunlight that fell on you was divided into squares and then stripes, and then it did not fall on you at all. I stepped back from the boarded-up window covered in dust. You cooed softly in your cradle. The sky could no longer see you, but the magpies continued to circle our house. They gathered in the eucalypt across the tree and left terrible scratches on my front door. She's my child, I told them one evening as I dragged out the garbage bin. Mine, born of my own flesh. They cackled and glared, darting around the spindly boughs and flashing their awful wings. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I assembled my fabrics and leaned it over my sewing machine. I stayed there until dawn. My finished garment was a suit resembling human skin. I dressed you and stitched you into it, closing every seam. Your red eyes stared at me from a new face. You held up new hands. You marvelled at your thumbs. I dared to step outside that evening. Have you looked your fill? I asked the magpies in the tree. I have nothing here for you now. They met my eyes. This time they made no sound. And so you wrung my life of wind, of air, of flight. But weren't those days happy, child? You grew strong in your new body. You crawled and then you walked and then you ran. You were a ravenous child. You devoured the cockroaches that roamed our pantry. You ate the skinks creeping through the floorboards, the frogs that found their way into the toilet. I caught you earthworms when it rained and wrapped them in dumpling skins. I set mouse traps around the house, and once when I ventured outside, I found that a grey rabbit had gotten itself caught. I brought it inside for you to kill yourself. Your human jaws were not strong enough, so I lent you my sewing scissors. Oh, you and your wild appetites. My days were spent at the sewing machine making clothes for a large apparel company, and sometimes while I worked, you roamed our house. You counted up every scratch on the wall, every cobweb on your ceiling. Sometimes you played on the floor beside me with bones and fabric scraps. Sometimes you opened my books to trace pictures that you didn't understand. I showed you how to make new sounds. Mama, I taught you. Ma, you replied. Ma, magpie. My hands stilled. The gears of my sewing machine stopped whirring. How did you make that sound? I had not taught it to you. You smiled up at me sweetly, sucking a frog's spine inside your mouth. The vertebral column had been cleared of all meat. My eyes flickered to the boarded-up window. Had anything heard? Nothing heard. And so I learned to speak. Yes, and you loved to chatter. You named all the things you wanted to eat and spoke of the shiny things you saw in your dreams. I loved our conversations. You told me you feared hunger, and I told you I feared the sky. It's a fickle thing, I warned you. It spits out the things it no longer needs, like toothpicks falling to the ground. And when it rages, it destroys whole homes. It's very powerful, and you must never look at it, for it might steal your soul through your eyes, and it wants yours very badly. Wide-eyed, you took my hands into yours and nodded. Mama, I promise. We both loved to sing. You learned pop songs from the radio and hymns from my old books. We sang duets together, but sometimes you assumed both roles and performed for me. I clapped with delight to hear you. The sounds your throat made were complex. Some of the notes you struck made me weep, while others made me tremble. One day you said, "There's a song inside me, Ma. Would you like to hear it?" I clapped my hands over your mouth. What if the sky were to hear, I said fiercely. Don't you remember how powerful it is, how dangerous? It could reach down and take you from me. I tried to interest you in sewing. The brilliant fabrics charmed your eyes, but you hated the meticulousness of it. The hands I sewn you into were not right for this kind of work. You made a yawning mess of your stitches, and you never could thread a needle. Can I catch my earthworms myself? You started to ask me. I want to go and look for mice. There aren't any in the traps. Ma, I'm bored. I'm hungry. What else can I do? Where else can I go? I'm hungry. I'm itchy all over. Where is the seam in my skin? Can we unpick it just for a moment? I tried to distract you with songs and feasts and games, but you began to glare and snap at my entreaties. Our disputes became more frequent, and one night we were shouting at each other when suddenly you took a pair of sewing scissors and slashed through the skin of your hand, and feathers burst out of the gash, black and white and bent at the barbs. I screamed and grabbed your arm, pinching together the skin on each side of the wound before more could spill out. I sewed your skin shut that night. Body limp, you let me. The rage leaked out of you. It began to rain and I held you, and you sang quietly. Rain still drummed our roof the next morning. Come, you said, and for the first time you led me outside. I had scared the magpies from their tree, circling until I was sure that each branch was bare, and then I held an umbrella over us to shield you from any other spying eyes of the sky. We did not go far, just a few steps from the door. You kept your head down as I had instructed, and we walked slowly and carefully. I pointed out an earthworm, and you plucked it from the ground and put it in your pocket. We stopped at a large puddle, my legs shaking. Were yours shaking too? Look at the reflection, I said. See what's behind us? You gave the barest of nods. It's covered by clouds today, but that's it, my child. I don't know how long you stayed there staring at the sliver of sky. Rain soaked your skin and clothes, yet you remained completely still. And eventually I squeezed your shoulder. Is that enough? Yes, Ma, you said. Thank you. I lied. You lied. Of course you wanted more. You made a hole in the pane of wood that I had used to seal your window. It must have taken you days, for the hole was the size of a coin. You must have used my sewing scissors. I did. I fit my eye to the tiny window and peered out, and this was it, the sky. I trembled before the sheer wideness unspooling in front of me. Yes, and the sky saw you too. Yes, and the sky gave a sigh like a clap of thunder. Yes, and the sky reached its many hands down towards you. Yes, and the sky lifted off the roof of our house cleanly like a lid. Yes, and the sky poured itself into our house as a storm of magpies, hundreds and hundreds of them. The whole house shook with their force as they swooped and circled and shrieked their raucous notes. I covered my head and fought through the flurry towards you, and I found you laughing, eyes alive with delight. "Ma," you cried, opening your arms. "Ma, magpies. They're all singing a song I've never heard before, but one I know is mine. This is the song inside me, and it's saying go. Take off your face and your skin and go. Quick, Ma, I can feel the wind singeing these hands. My body feels like it might catch fire. Help me out of my skin." My fingers fumbled as I unstitched the seams. You stepped out of the skin and your wings unfurled. They bloomed up around you in their fullness, bright and black and magnificent. The sky opened its fingers and you flew up into the centre of a great palm. There was an exchange of something, not words. I called for you, but you disappeared among the squall of 1,000 wings. In one great mass, all the magpies spilled out of our home. The roof of my house fell back in place with a thundering crash, and I was left with only dark. What are you waiting for? Ma, come up here, know the fullness of the world. My wings are sun-stained now, and I tell so many stories of starlight and the murky sea, of the great wind whose back I ride, and of you. The rooms of this life are enough for me. I have walls and sewing and song. I have the conversations I imagine between us, which I sing as duets. And this time I'm the one performing both roles. Sometimes I go for dawn walks beneath the wide pinkering sky and hear the songbirds warbling among the great black trees. What else could I want for? I suppose just one thing. Child, I'm waiting here in the birdhouse, in the place where you grew up. I've now cut windows so the place can breathe, and they let in wind and light. And now I walk on warm floorboards in the morning and enjoy the gentle nudge of a breeze. In your room, I have left the cobwebs just the way you like them. I have ripped the window pane from your window and cut the opening as large as I can make it. When you visit, I hope it will be wide enough to fit your wings.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm not going to ask why. I'll leave that with you, and I'll let the listeners make up their own mind.
Sure.
And obviously, I'll make sure that we've got a link to that text.
Thank you.
In the show notes. What I did notice is how Iona was listening along, and every time you mentioned the magpies. Yeah, so it was really, really quite beautiful. Thank you. And you've sort of left me a little speechless, but I always ask everyone one final question. So we're here in Tasmania, and I suppose if there were just 3 words, how would you describe being an artist in Tasmania? Or what 3 words sum it up?
Isolating, beautiful, and mysterious.
Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate you inviting me to your home and spending time with you and your beautiful daughter, and for sharing that text. It was really phenomenal. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Connect, Curate, Create. I hope you found inspiration and insights that you can apply to your own creative work. For highlights and links, check out the show notes, and be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast player so you never miss an episode. Tune in next time as I continue to explore life and work in the arts.